We're about to have incredible weather for this time of year. Maybe even a little too warm, but so what park are we going to this weekend? How are we celebrating our early foray into summer?
Early foray into summer is going to be hyper local for me, so I'll be at a San Francisco Recon Park, Golden Gate Park.
That was Kindley Walsh Lawlor, inaugural president and CEO of Parks California, the nonprofit partner to California State Parks. Kindley has spent over 25 years at the intersection of sustainability, equity, and access, and today she's sharing what it really takes to make California's parks belong to everyone. Welcome to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Jessa.
Hi, I'm Corinne.
And today we are joined by Kindley Walsh Lawlor, who is president and CEO of Parks California. Welcome to the podcast, Kindley.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So first things first, how are you connected to AEP?
Well, today's podcast interview is actually the start of a partnership, we hope, between Parks California and AEP. So excited to be on here with you both today.
Yay. We love that. Well, thank you for taking a chance with us. And yes, looking forward to the start of that relationship.
So we want to learn about you, and we want to learn about your leadership experience and your career path. And so can you tell us more about your career path and what really sparked your interest in a career that takes care of our environment here in California?
Yes, as it often does, it started a very long time ago. I grew up on a farm in Vermont on 30 acres, and being outside was just what our life was, taking care of dairy cows, babies, dairy cows, working in the garden or hanging our laundry, taking care of the land kept us fed and our family and our animals healthy. And so for me, it was just natural, right? This is just what life was. And when I first heard about the role at Parks California, this conceptual public-private partnership, I asked, why does this organization need to exist? And they told me because there are social justice issues in parks and public lands, and communities and parks need support. And that's really what made me sit up and take notice and jump in.
I love that. That's a very interesting question as you're coming into this position, like why? And so, I mean, as you said, you joined Parks California and you're its inaugural president and CEO in 2018. So what was it like building an organization from the ground up, and what were your first priorities, based on, of course, the feedback that you got too is, the why behind the organization?
The first big surprise for me was how much I loved building something. I was given some building blocks, and that was a real gift, right? Sort of conceptual idea of why we needed to be here, interest and partnership from the government entity, California State Parks. But it really was then trying to figure out how to bring it to life. And the first thing I did was start driving to different park districts and parks, of which there are 280 across California. For anyone who's driven across the state of California, it's a really big state. So the first 9 months, all I did was drive and listen and learn. That's what it felt like, really just listening to on the ground, amazing, committed, passionate parks employees talking about their spaces, their communities. And then it was time to build the team, establishing, sort of us as a connector in the public land space, sitting between a government entity and communities. And then, of course, it was really, what did that partnership start to look like and how would it come to life? And how did we set joint strategic goals? How did we set joint priorities so that all of the projects and programs that we were co-designing, Parks California and California State Parks, was being done in real partnership?
And so can you elaborate a bit on that more? Like, so what is the role of Parks California? And then how does your work intersect with California State Parks?
Yeah. So we're the public-private, this is a lot, right? Public-private nonprofit partner to California State Parks. And we were created by statute through the state to expand the reach and impact of the state park system. But to really sort of hone in on it, our role is to bring together community voice, private funding, philanthropy, expertise, and flexible resources to ensure that public lands are more inclusive, more climate resilient, and more sustainable. and really figuring out how to do that together. So we work alongside our partner, California State Parks, not separately from them, really on this aligned parallel track to add capacity where they need it most.
Interesting. And yeah, I'm a California resident and I'm learning today. So I love this. I love that our state has this.
And I believe we are the only one, the only nonprofit, only 501c3 that was born in this way, and has this, as we say, sort of inside out ability to work with a government entity.
Yeah, it's unique.
Yeah.
Sounds exciting work. And you touched on this a little bit too. So and Corinne, I feel like I saw you spark up. So
Oh, I
before I
was just
move
gonna say,
on.
yeah, I was just thinking, with it being unique and everything, did that, we love to see women, especially in, high level roles and titles like CEO and president. And I'm wondering, with it being unique, did that make it, easier to step into, such an entitled role, or meaning like the title is so important, or had you had private experience, or what was your thought process with like the yes, I'm going to grab this and go for it, which is so special, I think, for women to see.
I again, it goes back to the sort of the origin stories, right? I always was very fortunate, being raised in a way to believe that anything was possible, even though I grew up in a small rural town, and then was able to travel the world in my past job, and really wanted to hone in on California, where I've lived for now 30 plus years, to say, what do I not know about my own backyard? And I did feel it was a big shift. I mean, I shift sectors. I shift out of corporate to nonprofit. But what I believed in was the power of partnerships, of multi-stakeholder solution creation. And I truly believed that, having worked with governments in other countries, coming to do this in California, with the right people by my side, we could figure this out. And that's really sort of been a constant for me. People have taken chances on me throughout my career, and I take that to heart, and I take it really seriously. So it wasn't scary. It was interesting. That's what I would say, to make that change.
I love that. That is such a great attitude. And I think, again, really good for our listeners to hear, that thought process.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And some of this you mentioned a little bit about too already, but so Parks California sits at the intersection of conservation, equity, and community engagement. So how do you describe what you do to someone who's never heard of Parks California?
Yeah, at just over 7 years, that's still a lot of people, right? So we're always thinking about, how do we make it really clear about why we're here? So we're here to help make California's public lands more welcoming and resilient, number one. We work across three key pillars: access and belonging, climate and stewardship, and parks of the future. And essentially, our mission is to remove barriers so more people can experience parks, help care for these spaces, and support new ideas and partnerships that then prepare these parks for the future. So creating personal connection, creating tomorrow's park stewards. You hear that often from organizations, but we're really sitting at that intersection of access and climate, knitting them together as we think about the future of public spaces, public parks, and who feels comfortable being in them.
Would you be, if you're comfortable, sharing some examples of some of the barriers that you've discovered through your work there and how you're able to remove them, or maybe a plan or ideas to remove them?
Yeah, we started our first grant program called Route to Parks, and that was now over 6 years ago. And the barriers that consistently come up when you talk about communities accessing these spaces includes transportation, really, like literally how to get to a place, cultural comfort, relevant storytelling or programming when you arrive. And what we wanted to do with Route to Parks was, yes, help people physically get to a place, but then to create a real relationship on the ground in a park with the people who work there, with the space itself, and ultimately create customized, personalized programming for that specific community group or community or tribe who are coming in and saying, this is now a place for me, right? So that was a very pointed, was the first public-private mix of public funds, private funds raised that we brought together to create this route to parks. And I can talk a little bit more about it throughout this conversation because we're starting to really look at the numbers. But what I think is most interesting about this is 75% of the people who go to parks through Route to Parks grant are first-time park visitors.
That's incredible.
75%. Incredible. So that starts to really tee up, I think, how many barriers there are or perceived barriers, because they both matter, right? And that's why we created that program in partnership with state parks.
That's fantastic. What a success rate. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um, so you focus on, I mean, you kind of already talked about this, but if there's another one you want to give. So we're talking about scaling sustainable and future forward solutions. Are there any other examples of partnerships or programs that's really delivered?
Yes, there's a newer grant program that we're managing also in partnership with California State Parks. It's called the Arts in California Parks Grant Program, and it's just going into its third year. And that's really focused, it's a partnership between the California Arts Council, California State Parks, and Parks California. And it's lifting up communities and tribes again, but leveraging art as an equalizer, art as an opener for people to go and experience spaces. City, county, state parks across the board. And it's a mix of traditional art, spoken word, dance, all these different interpretations really driven by community and community artists, tribal and cultural bearers and holders who are coming in to experience and help others experience a specific space in a very specific artistic way. And that's something that we've been working on for the last few years as well.
That's so cool. Corinne, I feel like it's you nodding along and excited.
No, it's so interesting to hear more about like what goes on behind the scenes. Oftentimes you see, you visit a park and you see like an infographic, or you can see that, like, now that I'm thinking about it in hindsight, like, oh, I do see that combination of, art with what I'm doing, near the visitor center and going for a hike. But I never really thought about how much it would actually take to make all that happen. And so obviously understanding we love all of our children equally. Do you have a favorite kind of on the ground, like installation or event or upgrade that was just your, oh, I did it moment?
I think, I think they all become important because they have impact in such different ways. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about a park here in the San Francisco Bay Area called Candlestick State Recreation Area. And it's the first urban park in the state park system. And it was born through activism in the 70s in the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood. It's a really special place, a couple of 100 acres on the water, big fishing pier, opportunities to kayak in and out, beachfront, in the middle of the city. And it is a state park, which makes it unique as an urban park. We've been working out there. Parks California has been out there for over 5 years. And it really came into this relationship with this particular park, offering to be the face to community to build love for this space again. Really, again, start to think about what do community want from this urban park that they so fought for in the 70s, right? That sits right outside their door. And programming was a really big part of it. Fishing programs, learning how to fish programs, access to gear you need to fish is one great example. But we really started with art activations and a local artist. And it was more traditional, painting on the walls of things and outlining so people could come in and fill in. And I think the first time we did it, 5 years ago, we had maybe under 100 people. And now we've expanded to things like Kite Day. And the last Kite Day had over 1,000 people.
Wow.
And so you start to see that shift of, I trust this place. I trust the people in this place who wear a badge and a uniform, right? And that to me is the magic. That's the shift in these parks and public lands. And it takes partnerships. It takes partnerships and trust and time to build all of that.
Well, that's a great segue into the next question I had for you, which is how important, has developing partnerships been for your organization, and how do you identify the right partners to support your mission?
I mean, partnerships are central to everything we do. That was definitely something early days that got me really excited about this organization coming sort of onto the scene, right? So through access and belonging, that pillar alone that we focus on, we've created more than 100 new formal partnerships with local, tribal, sort of community nonprofit organizations, plus agencies and state parks, and really figuring out what's that connectivity and what does it need to be. But these partners, right, they prioritize community voice. They bring expertise and lived experience into something that others don't have. So we can create that more inclusive public land and park reality. And collectively, we're all committed to ensuring both the parks and the people are working together for climate resiliency, for better health, for just that magic moment, maybe personalized experience of coming into a place, right? And making it your own, I think is really what we think about ultimately as we talk about partners.
Yeah. And I mean, just it sounds like all of that, all of the work you're doing, right? You're seeing it in the numbers and being able to demonstrate quantitatively the value that you know is there, and it's all coming to fruition, which I think, yeah, it's just like I said, it's just really incredible work. And something else too we wanted to ask you about is you came from a Fortune 200 company, so a very large company and a corporate environment. So, how has your experience with ESG when you were in the corporate world and business partnerships shaped your approach to the nonprofit sector, which I would imagine was a pretty big shift, even though at the end of the day, you're still a leader and building something?
I started in the corporate sector on the business side, the creative business side. I was a designer and then really sort of manufacturing, thinking about global supply chains for the majority of my career. But for the last 13 years before I jumped into this role, I was focused on sustainability. So that, again, in this case, human rights and environmental opportunities in global supply chains. And solutions could only be created through multi-stakeholder initiatives globally. We leveraged, each of us, our unique abilities, but it really was working with nonprofits, with NGOs, with activist organizations, both sort of at the broader umbrella level, and then really hyper local, country by country, and in specific states within countries, depending on what was happening or what we were trying to figure out together. And I had so much respect for these localized organizations that knew the people better than anybody, right? Because they were from these communities. And so for me, it was such an honor to shift into the nonprofit space. It was sort of a dream. I wondered if I could, and to have that opportunity, although it's a very different sector, in a sense, it's still about partnerships and multi-stakeholders coming together and leveraging what they know to fix things, to make things better, to have that positive impact.
And I think maybe right now, for a lot of nonprofits, it's can be a really difficult climate between budget shortages and maybe intentional budget withholding from the federal government. What are maybe some more messages of hope, or are you seeing unique or different opportunities right now coming from maybe some unsteadiness from some other funding sources?
I think it requires you to be talking to each other more often, sharing what each of us are struggling with or worrying about, and then maybe offering those solution sets, right? the world inherently within the nonprofit space is so highly competitive, which is such an odd thing to say when we're all trying to do something to make things better, right? And so I think that's been a big journey and learning for me personally as a newer person in the nonprofit space. Um, I'd like to think we're less guarded in that way and more willing to say, have you ever, do you have a funding relationship here? Can we make an introduction for you? Doesn't mean we don't struggle with the same things, but sitting and having that statewide sort of scope gives us an opportunity, I think, to really think about what introductions can do to help organizations as they're struggling through maybe what's happening right now, or in general, to think more broadly about their own sustainability. And I think these 100+ grantees and relationships that we've built in the last now 6+ years, how are we continuously introducing them to other public lands? How are we introducing them to other funding streams so that they can continue to build that relationship between community and nature, community and public spaces?
I was at a conference last week and heard from a nonprofit leader. Her name's Loretta Turner, and she was talking about how nonprofits, she says, she's like, we're not charities. She's like, we are a business. It's really a designation. She's like, you still have to do fundraising, which is effectively sales, and it still need a lot of the same functions of a business. And so while it's called a nonprofit or we think of it as a charity, a lot of the work is very similar. It's yeah, I mean, I could go into details and I'm sure you could too, but it really shifted my mindset on that a lot when she was talking about that. So
Absolutely.
I could understand some of the challenges. And you've talked a lot about, community, obviously, and inclusion. So for you, what does an inclusive, or excuse me, what do inclusive experiences actually look like on the ground?
Yeah.
And what does success look like to you in the areas of inclusive experiences?
I mean, inclusive experiences, as we're developing them in partnership with communities and tribes, are ones where people feel welcome, safe, seen, inspired, right? To return, to physically be somewhere. They can be culturally relevant programs, multilingual resources, transportation support, as we talked about, or community-led design experiences. Really, for Parks California, our goal is to help people connect with nature and bring their family and bring their friends and see parks as places where they just truly belong. That parks start to look like this beautiful state of California looks, right? And we are really fortunate, I think, and really honored to help create opportunities for these communities and tribes to have a voice in shaping in what happens to these spaces and then how they're going to interact with them. And we've talked a little bit about arts and parks, right? This idea of, this grant program funds, yes, murals, but performances, storytelling, installations created by community and tribes and culture bearers in a way that so many people can experience that space in a unique way. We talked about Candlestick and that trust in a place to be a safe haven, in a sense, for a neighborhood as an urban park. And we're doing that in also very local areas in Santa Cruz through our local grants program that's actually supporting community-led planning for beach parks that were affected by both wildfire or storms, and community voice is shaping what the future design looks like of those spaces. So it goes far beyond just what I want to do when I arrive in an already built space, but for a space that's going through reimagination and revisioning, community voice actually helps shape what the future looks like in those places. Big Basin in the Santa Cruz Mountains that burned in 2020 is a great example of that, where inclusive planning actually specifically helped to reimagine how that park would be rebuilt.
And gosh, I mean, I love listening to you talk about this. I mean, we all live in California, right? And I assume some of our listeners do, and it's just such a special state. and it's so unique. And listening to you talk about all these parks, I'm like, I want to go outside. And it's just having the opportunity to have all these parks is like such a special experience. And being able to go and enjoy nature and just be outside is so grounding. And I think, when we get caught up in work and life and all the things going on in the world right now, it's just, I just love it. It's such a gift to the community, like the citizens of California, and people come and visit to have these wonderful spaces, and learning more about all the thought and planning that goes into it is just, I have such more of appreciation for it. So yeah, just thank you for all the work you do. I'm just like fangirling. I'm like, oh, I love this.
Hey,
Yeah.
Jessica, I absolutely adore that was your reaction, because mine was like, okay, we're talking about like reimagining physical improvements. My mind was like, okay, what CEQA have we done? What, like,
Your
public
planner, you're kicking
funding,
in.
yeah. What's the like good, bad, ugly CEQA NEPA stories we can get to the bottom of?
But it's so funny because I have this little public Instagram account when I travel to parks for work, which thankfully is almost every week, right? And I feel like my consistent message with anything I post is great day in the office. Because really that's what these spaces are, right? We're piloting things and learning from those pilots. We're doing visitor use management studies. We're bringing communities in and having them journal or draw what they're feeling and what they'd like to see. And it's so different than that very traditional sort of past way of working. And we're able to do this because we have a partner like we do with California State Parks. And they're so excited to learn with us and then take those learnings and say, okay, we did it in one park, let's try it in 3. Okay, we did it in 3, now let's go to 10. And it's this exponential opportunity to scale and have this impact, this really beautiful positive impact, again, on place and on people, right? Collectively. One doesn't benefit more or less. It's really figuring that out together.
Yeah, and listening to your work, well, when you were saying one of the first things you did was travel across the state and see all the parks, I'm like, what a dream job. That's amazing. You get to go talk to people in the community and learn about them and see these beautiful spaces. But I also want to recognize that it's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot that goes on that is probably at a desk, probably at a computer and meetings. But I guess it's like it's very glamorous, sitting on the other side of the table, so to speak, the virtual table. But also, I don't want to trivialize it, because I know there's a lot, obviously, of thought and intention that goes into this to make it successful. But it still sounds pretty cool.
I would say it is a very cool job, and I feel fortunate. I can acknowledge that for sure.
And we want to learn more about your leadership style. So, we already talked about a little bit about some of the challenges that come with leading a nonprofit. And so, what I guess has surprised you the most about it, and how has your leadership style evolved with this role?
Yeah, for me, authenticity and kindness and appreciation are just key to who I am in my personal and professional life. So as we built Parks California, which I did not build alone, I do actually want to give a shout out to the first 3 hires, Marion, Henna, and Jeff,
Woo.
who really, we actually set out to build a culture that we can all uphold as a team that makes us really proud to work at Parks California. And we established guiding principles, right? So you have to have a strategic plan, you have to have a vision and a mission, but we also wanted principles that said we want to be valued and trusted, and we want to value and trust who we work with, that we want to show up with emotional and cultural intelligence. We're engaging statewide, and we're talking about things that are really, really personal and sometimes really difficult for people. And how are we showing up as a friend in these situations, a great listener? And that ultimately what we learn, then we can become catalysts, right? To either change something or continue something that's working, to build on that positive impact. And so, I don't feel like I had to be anyone different shifting roles. I think it's, for me, always about acknowledging what makes you good at being a human and then figuring out how that drops into what you choose to do every day for work or what you choose every day to do with your friends or your family. It doesn't feel any separate. It's never felt separate to me ever in anything that I've chosen to do.
And, connecting that. So you've led human rights and ESG efforts at Gap Inc. and now, running this conservation nonprofit. So with bridging that, what are some of the lines that connects like those chapters of your career?
I mean, really, it's smart, passionate people who love what they do, who prioritize having a positive impact. I cannot stress enough how important it is to build a team of people who have completely different lived experiences from yourself, who know things that you don't. It changes everything. And it has always made me better. When I was at Gap Inc., the majority of my team sat in 20 plus countries. And every day I learned from them. Every day I listened. And they knew things and experienced things I would never truly be able to understand. But I could lean on that knowledge. And we were better because of it. Here in California, it's the same thing. What are people bringing in that I don't have and vice versa? And then how are we complementing each other? So for me, that's how good work gets done. There's lots of other realities, right? I mean, yes, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of hours. It takes a lot of energy and passion and connection. But ultimately, all of this is about people and how people show up for each other and for spaces. And if we're able to help create safe, welcoming spaces, people want to care for them, right? It's just, again, that synergistic relationship, that symbiotic relationship just builds over time. And it might be one person who went on a field trip as a kid, who then invited their parents back with the fourth grade adventure pass, who then came back for a birthday party. And then one of them maybe said, I want to work in that space. I want to be a scientist and work for California State Parks, right? And then everything starts to change in a really beautiful way. So I took us on a tangent, but that's what it feels
No.
like. It's all so interconnected and human based, nature based, right? It just feels natural. I don't know. All these words seem to be like the same, but that's what it feels like for me.
Well, it's really the like I was as you were doing it trying to think of like what's the reverse of the tragedy of the commons. So like, this it's like the celebration of the commons. It's instead of everyone coming together and like taking a little piece of it and degrading it like, we all learned in environmental studies 101, it's, getting the experience and then putting back and it's making better because of that collective experience. And I loved hearing your description as like literally the reverse of tragedy of the commons. I thought that was really special.
I love that. I love that too. Just hearing that is so helpful.
Yeah, I think of it as a regenerative approach.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you said it was a tangent, but it's a beautiful tangent. And like listening to all the ways and thinking about all the impact that this work has is really, it's what is the word I'm trying to say? Thought provoking. I guess I'm starting to think about it and see it differently. And hopefully our listeners are getting a lot of good takeaways too, I'm sure, from this conversation and how they view our state parks and all the work that goes into it too. And so I guess on that note, I think you shared so much with us, and like you said, there were some words that keep coming up, but it's a theme, right? I mean, you're very rooted in the values and your intention and your mission, and I think those common recurring words is important to hear. It's community, it's people, it's connection, it's nature, and I think that just really brings home your message of the work you're doing and what like the message is today, right? At the podcast. I think it's reinforcing all of it. So I actually appreciate the repetition because I'm like, oh, like
Great.
you're committed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what would you like on that note, if we can summarize this, put a nice bow on it, what do you want our listeners to know about Parks California or like what's a key takeaway?
Yeah, I think there's this collective belief that parks are more than places, right? And that's true from everyone who works at Parks California. Is true for everyone who works at California State Parks, the government entity, that these are gateways to health and connection and discovery. Nature isn't equally accessible to everyone, right? And our job is to help change it. Again, collectively, the two of us, state parks, Parks California, and then more broadly, community. And our work's about building a future where California state parks are more welcoming, more resilient, and truly reflective of the people they serve, who are going to them, who are experiencing them, and hopefully who are leaving them thinking about the next time they'll return.
Love it. And my takeaway, which I'm going to ask myself, was I loved this is how I want my tax dollars to work as a Californian. I'm like, I love this. Like, this is like so positive. So many times you hear of some things where I'm like, ugh, what are we doing here? But this is not that. And so just proud to be a tax paying Californian that contributes.
So I think, similar to that, and we're about to have incredible weather for this time of year, maybe even a little too warm. But so what park are we going to this weekend? How are we celebrating our early foray into summer?
Early foray into summer is going to be hyper local for me. So I'll be at a San Francisco Recon Park, Golden Gate Park, which I get to live very close to and can do sort of a 3 to 8 mile walk, depending on the time I give myself. But, there was this term that I love that was coined during COVID called the fake commute, when everyone was working from home. And the best days and the most productive days were when I went on a fake commute and walked out my door in the morning and did some sort of loop before I came back and sat at a desk and did videos all day. And I was reminded of that yesterday. Someone wanted to have a walk and a chat about sort of career ideas. And we did that first thing in the morning before the workday started. And my mind was in such a better place, and I slept well last night. And it's that reminder of, that forest bathing, 45-minute walk, whatever it is, right? Even in the middle of a city can really change people's outlooks and general health and sleep habits and how your emotions show up for the day as well. So that's where I'm going. Where are you two going this weekend?
I was trying to Google to see if it was state park. I don't think it is, but I live about 2.5 miles from Balboa Park in San Diego.
Which is a great park.
Great park. And then I actually every Friday make a point to walk up to Balboa Park and back before I start my day. So it's my, earmuffs employer, but it is my fake commute that I do every Friday morning, and it takes about 2 hours, but it exactly the same thing, like centers me, makes me, so much better at my job. So that's my cheater entry into the weekend to do tomorrow morning.
That's great.
Ooh, I think this whole time the park that's been in my head is Torrey Pines. It's just
a beloved space.
It's incredible. And so, and as you're talking, I kept thinking I need to go to Torrey Pines. So I don't know if I'll make it there this weekend only because of traffic, but I will be going very soon. And I'm so fortunate. I live very close to Mission Bay. And as you're talking, I don't do the commute and the walk, but I do walk my dog every morning down at the bay, and I take off my shoes, I put my feet in the sand. I just take a moment usually just to stand there and look around. And I'm like, every day, it never gets old. I'm like, this is beautiful. I can't believe I live here. I took a picture yesterday. I saw like 5 or 6 different birds, parrots, pelicans, geese, terns. There was another one. I was just like, this is just like having that moment. It's like just a tiny moment of mindfulness. And like gratitude is just, it's not even something I'd even like realize I'm doing until right now I'm talking about it, but I do it. And it's
super personal, right? We all just talked about how we're going to walk into a public space that's nature-based and use it in a different way for different reasons in a really unique approach. And I think that's the beauty in these partnerships. That's the beauty in working in a public-private experience, spending public and leveraging private dollars to get this work done in an innovative, nimble, sort of scalable way, because everybody deserves to feel like this, right? The way we're
Yes.
talking about it, everybody does. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
Yes. Ah, lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kindley. We'll get into the wrap up rapid five.
Sounds good.
So we talked about this a little bit, but what's your favorite daily habit?
My iced tea every morning. Cold, hot, rain or shine, it's always iced.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
3 things you'd bring to a deserted island.
Okay. My favorite book, The Once and Future King, Camelot based, King Arthur. Needlepoint kits. I'm a busy hand person who grew up sewing thanks to my Polish grandmother and mom. So I will be making gifts for people that I'll see once when I get off the island someday. And sunscreen, naturally.
It's a great balance. What's your favorite environmental policy?
So we don't work on policy development at Parks California, but we do support obviously science-based educational and ethical principles. So from a principal perspective, I love leave no trace. Growing up in Vermont, wasn't even an option that you did anything negative to these spaces that you relied on. So to me, it's just natural, but I love that there's a way to teach people why that's important.
And what's your favorite flora or fauna?
For me, it's flora and it's sunflowers because I love how they always turn towards the sun. And I think maybe humans need to do that a little more as well.
Ooh. And finish this sentence. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Wouldn't it be cool if people really listened to each other?
Love that. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and everything you're doing for our state and sharing all your knowledge. We appreciate it.
Thank you. So nice to meet you both. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.